Hello guys and welcome to the 8th episode of the Discord.NET bot development series. In this episode we are going to talk about ranks and auto roles. Ranks are roles that people can add to themselves by using commands, and auto roles are roles that will be added when someone joins the server automatically. So these two subjects are things we're going to talk about. Now this episode is indeed about events because we want to trigger something when someone joins the server, but later on we will also make something that sends a message when someone joins the server rather than just adding the role. But because doing both in one episode will take a lot of time and it will make one episode very long, and thus I decided that we're just gonna talk about ranks and auto roles in this episode, and then in the coming episode we're going to talk about customization of the welcoming module, so how you can change the background of it, how you can set a channel for where our messages will be sent to, and that kind of stuff. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like. If you have any suggestions or any feedback, please leave a comment, and if you really like this series, please subscribe to my channel, as there will come more episodes and probably even more series. Now let's get started. Now the very first thing that we want to do is head over to our infrastructure and open up the tutorial context file, and this is the database structure that we started working on in episode 6. Now the first thing we want to do here is we want to create classes that contain information about ranks and auto roles. So let's go here on the server and let's twice enter and create a new class and call this class a public class, and let's say rank. So each rank shall have an ID to identify itself. This is only for the database, we won't use it, but it's just so the database can identify a specific rank. We want the role ID, so the ID of the role that the rank contains, and the server ID, so we know to which server the rank belongs. So let's go here to curly brackets to make it public int ID, and this value should be get set, so we can get the value but also modify it, so set it. The second value we like is a public ulong role ID. So in here we're going to store the ID of the role of the rank. Again, use curly brackets and get set. And last but not least, we want to add the server ID. So we say public ulong server ID, and in this property we can store the ID of the server, so we can, for example, search for all ranks of a server. And again, curly brackets, get set. Now we also want to create a new property for auto roles. So just copy the class, paste it under the rank, and rename rank to auto role. Now replace the character within the class so the weird highlighting goes away, and there we go. We now have ranks and we have auto roles. Now to actually put these two classes inside of our database, go all the way up, enter, and say public db set, and we want a table of rank, so let's say rank. Let's call the table ranks, and again this value should also be get set, so we can modify and set the values inside of the table. Now we also want a table for public db set auto role, because we also want a table for auto roles, and we call this table auto roles. Again, curly brackets, get set. Now we want to push these changes to our database so we can actually put them to use. Now to do this, the first thing we want to do is go to your Windows icon right here, type in examp, open up examp, and start up MySQL and Apache. Now click on admin next to MySQL, and let's minimize the window for now. Let's also minimize Apache. And now we want to push our changes onto our database so we can actually use a ranks table and the auto roles table. Go to tools, NuGet Package Manager and Package Manager Console. Now before doing anything, you want to make sure that the default project is set to infrastructure and that the starter project is set to infrastructure 2. When you've done that, go to the console and type in add migration, and here we can type in a name. As you can see, the previous migration that we made, so the first time we made a migration, which was in episode 6, we called it the initial version. Now we're going to call it the second version. So add migration second version. Let it build. And when it's done building, we want to push our changes to the database. So we say update database. Now, if everything goes well, it will say applying migration, and then it will say done. Now, if we go to our browser, refresh the page, go inside of our tutorial database, you'll see a table called auto roles, ranks, and servers, each containing an ID, a role ID, and a server ID. Perfect. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to create functions that are able to communicate with our database. For example, in the servers class, we made functions to modify the guild prefix and get the guild prefix. But now we also want to make functions that allow us to create new ranks, new auto roles, but also modify them. So what we want to do is head over to the infrastructure project, right click it, click on add, and click on class. Now as a name, we call the first class ranks. Press enter. Now the first thing we want to do here is we want to make the class public, so public class ranks. And inside of here, we want to create around 4 functions. The first one we want to create is a function that is able to grab all the ranks of a server and then return it to us as a list. In order to do this, we first want to inject our database context into the file, just like we did at servers right over here. Copy these lines, go back to ranks and paste them in there. Now replace servers with ranks so we can actually access our database right here. Now in here, type public async task, and the return type should be a list of rank. So it's going to return a list of ranks. Then we say get ranks async, and then as an argument we want to pass in the ID of a server. So we say ulong ID. Hover over task, click on the light bulb, and using system threading tasks. Now in here, the first thing we want to do is create a new variable that we call ranks. So var ranks equals await underscore context, and we want to use the ranks table. So we say dot ranks, which equals the table that we created all the way here. So we can now use this table and search based upon these properties. Now here what we want to do is we want to search for all ranks that have the server ID of the server ID that was passed here. So we say where, then brackets, an x, a lambda expression, and then we say x dot server ID equals the ID that we pass in a bit more up. Now here what we do is we say to list async, so we actually have a list of all the ranks within the server. Then the final thing we want to do is say return await task.from result and then the ranks. So now we have a list of all the ranks based upon the server ID. The next thing we want to create is a function that's able to add a new rank to the server. Now to do this, we create a new function. We say public async task add rank async. Now here as arguments, we again want a server ID, so ulong ID, but we also want the ID of a role. So let's say ulong role ID. Press enter, curly brackets, and inside of here what we want to do first is search for the server. So we say var server equals await underscore context dot servers and enter, and then we want to search all the servers and find the server that has the ID that we passed in earlier. Now, if the server is null, meaning that there is no server in the database, we want to add a server to the database. So we say underscore context dot add a new server, and the ID of the server should be the ID that was passed a bit more up. Now, we also want to add a new rank to our database. So we say context add new rank, curly brackets, the role ID should be the role ID that was passed in earlier, and the server ID exactly the same. It should be the ID that was passed in earlier. Now, finally, we say await underscore context dot save changes async, and we end with a semicolon. Now, we also want a function that's able to remove a rank from a guild. So we can delete ranks so they no longer can be used in order to give to a user. And in order to do this, we say public async task remove rank async. Again, we want to pass in the ID of the server, and we want to pass in the ID of the role. So ulong role ID. Curly brackets, and inside what we first say is we say var rank equals await underscore context dot ranks, because we want to use the ranks table. Now in this table we want to search for all ranks that have the role ID which equals the role ID that was passed into the method. So where x and then the role ID equals the role ID that was passed in. Then we want to select the first or default result asynchronously from the database. Now we want to remove the rank from our database. So we say underscore context dot remove and then the rank. Last but not least, we want to save the changes. So we say await underscore context dot save changes async. Now last but not least, we want to create a function that's able to remove multiple ranks by using a list. Now why do we want a function that does that? Now later on we want to create a function that is able to actually give the roles to us, so we can access the name of the role and we can automatically give the role to a user. But what if the bot is no longer able to give the role to the user because the server owner decided that the bot does not longer have permissions to add a role, or that the role simply doesn't exist anymore? In that case, if the role doesn't exist anymore, or if the bot cannot even give the role to the user anymore, we want to remove the rank from the server so we don't cause any issues. And that we can do easily by using a function that's able to remove multiple ranks at the same time. So that if we have multiple ranks that no longer work, we can just delete them at once instead of using every time removing and removing and removing. So in order to do this, we say public async task and we say clear ranks async. And then we want to pass in a list containing rank and we want to call this ranks. So we have a list of ranks. Then curly brackets, and inside here, a very simple thing we can do is say underscore context dot remove range, and then the list that we just passed in. Then we want to save the changes, so we say await underscore context dot save changes async. And that's basically all the functions that we're going to need from the database. Now we also have auto roles, and for those auto roles we want to use exactly the same functions. So go to the infrastructure project, right click it, click on add, click on class, and create a new class that's called auto roles. In this class we want to paste everything that we just did in ranks because everything works exactly the same. So go back to ranks, select everything, copy it, paste it in auto roles, replace ranks with auto roles, and replace it again here, ranks with auto roles. Now in the names, we want to change it from get ranks async to get auto roles async. Then here we want to change ranks to auto role. We want to go a bit more down, change context.ranks to context.auto roles. And here we want to replace the name of the variable with auto roles and then pass in the auto roles variable right here. Next, add rank async should be add auto role async. Go a bit more down, we want to say context.add new auto role rather than rank, and that's it. Go even more down, remove rank async should be remove auto role async. Replace context.ranks with context.auto roles. Replace the variable name of rank with auto role. Copy the name, paste it in right here, save the changes. And last but not least, clear ranks async should be clear auto roles async. And instead of using the ranks variable, we say auto roles. And instead of using rank, we say auto role. Copy the name, paste it in there, and that's it. Now we have two classes that are able to create, modify, etc. auto roles and ranks. Now because we're finished with doing all the database required things, we can get started with some methods that we need to make inside of our template or whatever the project is called for your Discord bot. So get inside of this project, get inside of the utilities folder, and here we want to create again two new classes. One is a class for the auto roles and one is going to be a class for the ranks. Right click the folder and say add and say class. And the first one we want to work with is a ranks helper. So I call the class a ranks helper. Now inside of here, we want to create the function that's able to give us the roles as actual Discord roles so we can just apply them to a user. And we can, instead of doing difficult things, we can just simply check if all of the roles exist in the server and if our bot is able to access them. Now first things first, let's make this class public. Second, we again want to inject something, but in this case not the database context, but we want to inject the method that we made earlier, the ranks and server class. So in the ranks helper, we want to inject the ranks class. So what we say here is we say private read-only ranks, and then we want to do it like this. So we automatically add the using infrastructure right there. Then we say underscore ranks, semicolon. Then we create a public constructor. So it's a public ranks helper ranks, just like that. And then we say underscore ranks equals ranks, just like that. Now we can put them to use. Now before continuing, it's important that we go to our program and here add singleton both ranks and auto roles. So we say dot add singleton, then the ranks, just like that, and the auto roles. So auto roles, just like that. Now we can actually use the ranks and auto roles classes inside of our ranks helper. Now go a bit more down, and the first thing we want to create is a function that's able to get all the ranks within a server, but then as actual Discord roles. So we say public async task, and as return type, instead of using ranks, we actually return roles. So we say list and then I role, and then as name we call it get ranks async. And as parameter we want to pass in guild, so we can actually use the guild to check things and that kind of stuff. Hover over task, click on the light bulb and say using system threading tasks. Now first things first, we want to create a new variable which is called roles. Now this one is going to be the list that we will be returning all the way at the end. So let's say var roles equals a new list with the type of I role. Just like this, and then use brackets and a semicolon. Now here we want to create a list of invalid ranks. So a list of ranks that are incorrect or have a higher position than the bot or are deleted, that kind of stuff. So we call this var invalid ranks equals a new list, and the type should be rank. Brackets and a semicolon. Now we also want to fetch all the ranks that we currently have. So let's make a new line and say var ranks equals the await underscore ranks dot get ranks async guild dot id. So now we fetch all the ranks based upon the database and then store them into a variable called ranks. Then we want to loop over all ranks of our server and then check if they are valid, that kind of stuff. So here we say for each var rank in ranks, so we can loop over them, we want to make sure that they are valid, don't have a higher position, that kind of stuff. So what we say here, var role equals guild.roles.first or default. So it picks the first or default role that it can find, and that should be based upon a condition. So we say x and then a lambda expression, and then we say x.id equals the rank.role ID. So we can make sure that the role actually exists. Now, if the role is null, meaning that it could not find the role, meaning that the role was deleted, we add the role or the rank to the list of invalid ranks. So we say invalid ranks.add and then the rank. So we can later on delete it. Now let's actually add some curly brackets, because we're also going to have an else statement, which is when the role is not null. And in that case, if it's not null, just like this, we want to do something different. Also add another curly bracket right there, so it's nicely done, and add another curly bracket right there. So if the role is not null, in that case what we want to do is we want to execute something different. The first thing we want is to fetch the current user. So we want to fetch the bot from the guild. And to do this we say var current user equals await guild.get current user async. So we now have our bot stored into a variable, and this allows us to check, for example, the hierarchy of our bot inside of the server. Now here we create a new variable to store the hierarchy of our bot, so we can check if the position is high enough in order to add the role to a user. So we say var hierarchy equals, and then here what we say is the current user that we fetched earlier as a socket guild user, and then we put brackets around it, and then we say dot hierarchy. So we have it stored into a nice variable. Next, we want to check if the role dot position, so the position of the role based upon if the bot is higher than the role or not. So role dot position is higher than the hierarchy of the bot. In that case, we also wanted to add it to the invalid ranks. So we say invalid ranks dot add and then the rank. If that's not the case, then we can add the role to our valid roles. So we say roles dot add and then the role. Now that's the loop that we need. Let's go outside of the loop. And here what we want to do is if the invalid ranks dot count, so the total amount of invalid ranks is higher than 0, in that case what we do is we say await underscore ranks dot clear ranks async based upon the invalid ranks list that we made earlier, just like that. Then finally we want to return all the roles, and that's the first function that we need. Now we also need a class for our auto roles. So go to the utilities folder, click on add, click on class, and let's make a new class and call this auto roles helper. Press enter. Now go back to your ranks helper, copy everything inside of this, paste it into the auto roles helper. Now replace ranks helper with auto roles helper, copy it, paste it right there, replace ranks with auto roles. Let's call this auto roles. Again, do the same here. So auto roles underscore auto roles. And then last but not least, we say underscore auto roles equals the auto roles. Now instead of the name get ranks async, we say get auto roles async. Now we go a bit more down. We say instead of invalid ranks, we say invalid auto roles. And we want this to be a list of auto roles, just like that. Then here we say var auto roles equals await underscore auto roles dot get auto roles async, just like this. And then instead of looping over the ranks, we want to loop over the auto roles. So we say var auto role in auto roles. So we loop over the auto roles. Then we want to check if everything matches right there. And if not, we want to add it to the auto role. And we want to add the auto role itself. Then here we say role.position is higher than the hierarchy, should be adding it to the invalid auto roles. And it should add the auto role. If the invalid auto roles that count is higher than 0, it will use the auto roles and then the clear auto roles async function to clear and remove all the invalid auto roles. And that might have sounded a bit complicated, but now we have two functions that are capable of fetching all the roles inside of our Discord servers to get the auto roles, but also the ranks. And if they are not correct or something is wrong, they are able to delete them. Now we can go and close up the utilities folder, and we can also close the entire infrastructure project. We can go inside of our modules, and for these commands, let's make a new folder. So click on the modules folder, click on add and click on class. Now let's call this class configuration. So in this class, we can make the commands to configure the auto roles and the ranks. Now go back to your example module and let's copy this. Go back to the configuration class. First thing says, let's make the class public and then just paste it right there. So we now use the module base and then the socket command context. Hover over it. Click on the light bulb and say using discord.commands. And now let's make some commands that are able to change all of the stuff that we just made. So there are a few commands that we want to make. We want to make commands that are able to add and remove auto roles and ranks. And we want to make commands that are able to give a rank to a user. And we also want to use an event. So when a user joins the server, we want to use that event in order to give the auto roles to the user. So the first thing we want to create is the functions related to the ranks. So first things first, let's make a new command and let's give it the name ranks. This command can be executed in order to list all the ranks within a server. So we say command ranks and we want to make this a public async task ranks. Should be no arguments, that's all fine. Curly brackets, and inside here the first thing we do is we want to fetch the ranks of a server. But in order to do so, we want to inject the ranks helper inside of this class. So we say private read-only ranks helper underscore ranks helper semicolon, then use a constructor, public configuration, ranks helper, and then curly brackets, inject it into the ranks helper so we can actually use it. Now, just like we did before, we want to go to our program.cs and add both the ranks helper and the auto rules helper to our services. So we say dot add singleton, pointy brackets, ranks helper goes first, brackets, and last but not least we say add singleton and then pointy brackets, and we say auto rules helper. Again, pointy brackets and brackets. That's it. We no longer need to add any services here. Now we can actually make use of everything that we just made. Now hover over task, wait for the icon to appear and say using system threading tasks, and now we can use tasks. Now in here, the first thing we want to fetch, like I said earlier, are all the ranks within the guild. So we say var ranks equals await underscore ranks helper does get ranks async, and we want to pass in the context.guild, so we can just simply use that. Then if the ranks.count equals null, so if the server does not have any ranks, we just want to say await reply async, this server does not yet have any ranks. Now this is a very basic message. You could add a nice embed around it, you could give an embed a nice title and that kind of stuff, but that's not what we do in these tutorials, not yet at least. For now, we just send simple messages back, and you can customize them in any way you like. Now again, we use the early return statement, so if this happens, it just stops right there and that's it. Now next, because the process can take a while, there's a very nice thing we can do in order to let our user know, like, hey, we're working on it, we don't yet have a response, but just hold on 2-3 seconds and we'll have a nice response for you. And that is trigger typing async. Trigger typing async basically means that in a channel, it shows that the bot is typing, which is an indication to the user like, hey, it received the command, it's working on it, but it can take a while. Although it just takes 2 or 3 seconds, it's still nice to indicate like, hey, we're working on it. So we say await context.channel.trigger typing async, just like that. Now what we want to do is let our user know what ranks are available. So let's create a string, and we call the string a description. And the first thing that the description should say is this message lists all available ranks, just like that. Then we use a semicolon at the end. And now what we can do is loop over the ranks and then add each rank to the description. So what we say here is we say for each var rank in ranks, we say description plus equals, which means it grabs the description and adds something on the end, so plus equals. Then here we use a backslash and then an n. And a backslash n means that we create a new line, and we want to create a new line so we can nicely separate every single rank. Then what we can do here is we add a $sign at the start, and we say 2 curly brackets, and then in here what we can do is we can say rank dot mention, and then we use 2 normal brackets, and here we pass in the rank dot id. So this allows people to add the rank to them by using the ID, or for example the name. And to make that instruction a bit more clearer, what you can do here is in the description make a new line and say, in order to add a rank, you can use the name or ID of the rank. So you could use, for example, the name of the role, or you could use the ID of the role if multiple ranks have exactly the same name. So what we can do here now is we can return our message with the description to the user. So we say await, reply async, and then the description, just like that. And that's already it. Now we already have a working function, and when we run our Discord bot right now, we first want to of course change the starter project to our template, and also go to the package manager and say that the default project should be the template. Then save it and run it. Now if you go to Discord and try to execute the ranks command, it will tell you that this server does not yet have any ranks. And that's correct. We didn't make the commands yet to add any ranks, but we don't have any yet, so that's perfectly correct. Now the next command that we want to make is a command that allows us to add ranks. So we say command, and then between a string we say add rank, and now an important thing comes. Permissions. We don't want to allow everyone in the server to create new ranks. We only want to let administrators create new ranks. So we say require user permission and then the permission guild permission dot administrator. So we only want to let users that have the administrative permissions to be able to execute this command. Now we also want to let the bot have enough permissions in order to add the rank to users. So we say require bot permission and then guild permission manage roles. So the bot is actually able to give roles to members, otherwise it's useless. Now we say public async task, and now a nice thing we can do is we can let the user pass in multiple arguments. This is a thing you can choose. You can, for example, choose whether or not the user should be able to mention the role and that kind of stuff. But in this case and for this tutorial, we're just going to work with the name of the role. So for example, if you have a role called tutorial, you just have to type in the name tutorial and then it will be the rank. So we say public async task add rank, and as arguments, we want a string name. Now, what if the name of a role contains an answer? That means that there will be two arguments, right? And that's correct. We don't want that to be. We want to allow all names that have spaces, anything. And in order to do this, instead of just using a regular string, you go all the way to the start and you use square brackets, and you say remainder, and then it becomes a remainder string called name. And remainder means that the string can contain spaces, it doesn't matter. It will take everything as one argument. It's also impossible to just use another argument after this because everything will be used as the remainder string. You can only use arguments before the remainder string. So we say remainder string name, then we open the function, and in here we can start processing the creation of ranks. But before doing so, we again need to think about something important. Because ranks, add rank and all those commands will be database related commands. And like I said in a previous episode, when things can take long or when they are database related, it's important to use these tasks on a separate process. That way, it won't stop any other command from working. So an important thing to do here, go to line 20, add a comma after the string and say run mode equals run mode dot async. Now copy this, go to line 41 and do the exact same so that both commands will work asynchronously on a separate process, and we will keep doing this for every single command that we will be making that is database related, that kind of stuff. Now also before continuing, let's go to our example module. Let's grab the prefix command that we had right here and let's say Ctrl X, backspace, let's get rid of these two lines. Go back to the configuration class and paste in the command above the ranks command. And also because the prefix command is a database related command, it's useful to just use run mode equals run mode dot async. Now we want to go back to our example module, go all the way up, and we can get rid of the injection of these servers. Let's get rid of it right there. Go back to the configuration class, paste it in right there, go back to the example module, get rid of the injection right there, paste it in right here, go back to the example module, get rid of it right here, go to the configuration class, paste it right there, and now we can use the servers class within our configuration class. And of course, don't forget to use the infrastructure. Now if we go all the way down, it's time to actually do some processing to add the role to the ranks. So the first thing I want to do is again indicate that the bot is doing something, that we received the command and that we're working on it. So what we do here is we say wait context.channel.trigger typing async. Now we want to fetch all the ranks of the server, so you say var ranks equals await underscore ranks helper dot get ranks async. and then pass in the context.guild. So we fetch all the ranks as roles that we can use. The next thing we want to do is we want to search in our server for a role that contains the name that was passed in right here. So we say var role equals context.guild.roles, and then we want to pick the first or default role which has the same name as that one that was provided earlier. So you say first or default, and here we can decide whether or not we want to use case sensitivity. In my case, I'm not going to use case sensitivity. So even if you type in the wrong name in regards of case sensitivity, it will still work. You can get rid of this, but in my case, I'm just going to work with it. So we say x, create a lambda expression, string dot equals, and then x.name, and then we compare it with the name that was sent earlier, and then we use string comparison dot current culture ignore case. Now that might sound complicated, but it basically means that it will compare and let us know if this is true, so if the string equals the name, but it will ignore case sensitivity. So that's a nice way of comparing both. Now if the role equals null, so if the role doesn't exist, if the name is invalid, we say await, reply async, and then we say that role does not exist, and of course a semicolon at the end. Again, we use an early return statement, and we can move on to check if the role has a higher position than our bot, which means we cannot add it because it just won't work. So you say if the role.position is higher than context.guild.current-user.hierarchy, then we say await, reply async, that role has a higher position than the bot, and a semicolon, and again use an early return statement. Now the last thing we want to check is if the role is already a rank, because you don't want to let people add the same rank over and over again. So you say if ranks.any, and then use a lambda expression just like that, and then if any rank.id x.id equals the role.id, so if any of the ranks that we have equal the role ID that's in there that we just fetched, then we also want to send an error and then say await, reply async, that role is already a rank. Semicolon at the end, use an early return statement, and finally what we can do is add the rank to our server. So we want to use the ranks functions that we made into our infrastructure project, and so we want to go all the way back up, and we say here private read-only ranks underscore ranks. Here we say ranks, and finally we say underscore ranks equals ranks. Now we go a bit more down, and now we can add the rank to our server. So we say wait underscore ranks dot add rank async, and in here we want to pass in the ID of the server and the role ID. So we say first things first, we add the server ID. So we say context.guild.id, and then we say role.id. So we pass in that. The next thing we can do is say, hey, it worked out, the rank has been added. So we say wait, reply async, the role, and now let's mention the role so it looks a bit nice. So the role.mention has been added to the ranks, and nice semicolon at the end. Let's check if it works. Run the template, go to Discord, and as you can see in this server I have a test and verified role which we made earlier. Let's remove the test role from me so we can actually test it on later, and say !ranks. As you can see, the server right now does not have any ranks yet. Now we say add rank, and then a test role. The role has a higher position than the bot, so our error messages also work. Let's go to the server settings, go to roles, and let's put the tutorial role above the testing role. Save the changes, close the window, and say add rank test. The role test has been added to the ranks. Now the funny thing is, if we go back here and go to our browser and refresh this, take a look at the ranks table, you'll see that we now also have it implemented into our database. So it works good. So if we go here now and say !ranks, it will say this message lists all available ranks. In order to add a rank, you can use the name or ID of the rank. So as you can see, it works perfectly fine. Now let's test what happens when I go to roles and delete the test role, because that means there will be a big issue. It cannot find the role. So let's go here back, and as you can see, it already updates it, but that's because of Discord. Now if we execute the command again, it will say the server doesn't yet have any ranks. That was fast. It replied really quickly. And if we go back here and refresh the page, you can see that it automatically removed it from our database. So all of our code works. Let's minimize the browser. Let's close our Discord bot. And now we can also apply this to the auto ranks. So in order to do that, we can copy both the ranks command and the add ranks command and then paste them right here. But instead of allowing everyone to execute the auto roles command, so let's first rename it auto roles, we want only to let administrators be able to view auto roles, because members shouldn't really be able to see what things have been configured. This is more private thing for administrators. So we say require user permission good permission dot administrator, and of course rename this to auto roles and rename this to add auto role. Now here we want to, of course, first add the auto roles helper to the class. So we say private read only auto roles helper underscore auto roles helper. Let's put an underscore before all of that, just like that. Semicolon at the end. And let's add it right here. Auto roles helper, just like that. Add it to the injection. So auto roles helper equals auto roles helper. And we also want to inject our auto roles class that we made in the infrastructure project. So we say private read only auto roles underscore auto roles. And again, add it right here. So we say auto roles, and we say here underscore auto roles equals auto roles. So we can actually use everything that we need. Let's go back all the way down and replace here underscore ranks helper with underscore auto roles helper. Let's replace get ranks async with dot get auto roles async. And let's rename this to auto roles, just like that. Paste it right here. This server doesn't yet have any auto roles instead of ranks. String description, this message lists all auto roles in order, and then here what we can say, in order to remove an auto role, use the name or ID, just like that. And then of course here we say auto role. For each auto role and auto roles, we want to mention the auto role and we want to pass in the ID of the auto role. This command will now work. And we can also say add auto role, which has the same require permissions, that's correct. And then instead of here using the ranks helper, we say underscore auto roles helper. And we say instead of get ranks async, we say get auto roles async. Then here var role, we check if the role actually exists. Then we say that role doesn't exist. Here we check the hierarchy. And finally here what we can say, if the auto roles and any item within the auto roles has the same ID as the role ID, it should error. So let's replace the name of the list right here from ranks with auto roles. So now it can actually work. And then we can say here that role is already an auto role. Then finally, of course, we want to say underscore auto roles dot add auto role async, just like that. And last but not least, we say the role and then mention the role has been added to the auto roles. Now let's run this and see if that also works. So let's go back to Discord, go to the server settings, go to the roles. Let's create 2 new roles. Let's create one that's called auto role and make it yellow. And let's create one that we call rank and let's make this cyan-ish. Now go back and let's say here ranks, which are none. We don't have any ranks. And auto roles, which are also none. We don't have any auto roles. Now let's add a rank. We say rank, add rank, rank. And we say add auto role, just like that. Now if we say exclamation mark ranks, we will have only the rank role. And if we say auto roles, we will only have the auto role. So everything works perfect. Now let's close our Discord bot. So now we have commands in order to fetch all the auto roles within a server, and we are able to use commands in order to add auto roles or add ranks. The next commands that we want to make is to remove auto roles and to remove ranks, and how we can let people add ranks to themselves. Let's go a bit more up to make the delete rank command. So in here what we do is we say command, and then we pass in del rank, as in a short version of rank, so del rank. And again, we want this command to run as run mode equals run mode dot async. So it runs asynchronously on a separate project. Now again, we want to use the same permissions. The bot should have the guild permissions.manage roles permission, and the user should have administrative permissions. Now we make the function, we say public async task, and this task should be called del rank. Again, you should be able to pass in a name. So we're going to use remainder string name of the role that you want to delete as rank. Now here again, we let the user know that we are working on his command. So we say await context.channel.trigger typing asynchronous. Then we want to fetch all the ranks within the server. So we say var ranks equals await underscore ranks helper dot get ranks async by using the context.guild, and now we have all the ranks. Now again, we can copy the process of searching for the role right here. So we say if the role does not exist, we give it an error, and if it does exist, we now have it stored into a variable. Next thing that we want to do is, this doesn't matter, the position, the hierarchy, because we're just removing it, meaning that it doesn't really matter where the rank is positioned, so that's fine. Now a thing that we do want to check is if the role is even a rank. So what we can do here is say if ranks.any, and then a lambda expression just like this, and then the ID equals the role.id, but instead of using equals we say does not equal. So if none of the ranks have the same ID as our role ID, then we want to give an error, hey, this role is not even a rank. So we say wait, reply async, we say that role is not a rank yet, and then we use a semicolon, and again we use the early return statement. Now we can here assume that the rank exists and it's still in the list and it's actually a role, and in that case what we want to do is say await underscore ranks dot remove rank async, and we pass in the ID of our server, so context.guild.id, and then we pass in the ID of the role, just role.id. Next, we let the user know, hey, we're done, the role is no longer a rank. So you say reply async, and then we say the role, and then role.mention has been removed from the ranks, just like that. And now it's no longer a rank. Now we can copy all of this, then go a bit more down, and say go under the add auto roles, and instead of saying del rank, we now say del auto role, replace the function name with del auto role, just like that. And then here, instead of using the ranks helper get rank async, we use underscore auto roles helper dot get auto roles async by using the context guild. Then let's rename the ranks variable to auto roles, and here what we can do is we can search again. This process is exactly the same. It's fine. We don't need to change anything about that. But then here we go and then check if in the auto roles there is any role matching the role that was passed. Then we say that role is not a auto role, and we use an, so that's not an auto role yet. Finally, instead of using ranks.remove rank async, we use underscore auto roles.remove auto role async. And then finally, last but not least, we say the role.mention has been removed from the auto roles, just like that. So now we are able to delete and add auto roles and ranks. Now the final command that we want to make is a command that's able to assign or remove the rank from someone. In order to do this, we go to the example module right here, and now all the way down we can create a new command which is called rank. So the rank command can be used in order to give someone rank or let it remove it from someone. So we say command rank. Again, we want to run this command on a separate task. So we say run mode equals run mode.async, just like that. Now we make a new task and we say public async task rank. And again, here we want to pass in a remainder and then a string, and it should be the name of the rank. Now earlier we said in the configuration here that you can also use the ID or the name. So in this case we need to search for both name or ID, and thus we're not going to call this name, but we're going to call this identifier. So we can check if this is an ID or if this is something else, just like that. So the first things first, what we always want to do is we want to let the user know that we're working on it. So we say await context.channel.trigger typing async, just like that. Now we want to store all the ranks into one variable, but before doing so we need to inject our helper of the ranks into our class. So we go all the way back here and we say private read only ranks helper and then underscore ranks helper. Then we go here, we say ranks helper. And finally, we say underscore ranks helper equals the ranks helper. Just like that, and now we can actually put it to use. So now if we go all the way back down here, we can say var ranks equals await underscore ranks helper dot get ranks async, and we pass in the context.guild. The next thing that we can do is we can check whether or not the provided identifier is an ID of a role or if it's just a name. Now the way that we can do this is by creating an empty variable and then later filling it based upon if it's an ID or if it's a name. And a simple way of doing this is to create a new variable, which is a iRole role, and just put it like this. So it's an empty role. It's really nothing actually. But we can do this in order to later check if the role is still nothing, and that means that it's not an ID, not a string, something went wrong, so we get return an error. Now what we can do is we can say if the ulong.tryParse, and then we pass in the identifier, and we want to get the result of that by using out ulong, and then we say role ID. Now this if statement means that if the identifier was passable to an ulong, so if we could pass the ID to a ulong, which means that it's a ulong, it's a number, then we can check with the ulong if it's an actual role that exists. So in here what we can do is we can say var role by ID, let's just call it like that, equals context.guild.roles.first or default. So we're going to pick the first or default role, and then a lambda expression just like this, and we say the first role that has the ID of the role ID that we just passed right here. So we can check by this if there exists a role by using the ID that we have right here. And if that's the case, then we can pass that role to this variable right here. But we first want to check if the role by ID equals null, we say await reply async, and we say that role does not exist. And then we say early return statement. Now, if that's not the case, a simple thing that we now can do is we can say role equals role by ID, and now we have an actual role that's right there. Now, if it failed to pass, then we want to check if the identifier is a name of a role and if there actually exists a role with that name. So what we do here is we go back to configuration. Now here we're looking for a line, for example, where we said var role equals context.guild.roles. So we can filter based upon name, but ignore the case sensitivity like we did earlier. Search for a line like that and then just copy everything after the equals. Now go back to the example module, and here we want to create a new variable. Let's call this var role by name equals, and then just like that. Now what you want to do is replace the name here with identifier and hover over string comparison, click on the light bulb and say using system. So now we're able to use that. Now if the role by name equals null, so if there's nothing, we say await reply async, that role does not exist. Again, use an early return statement. And if it does exist, so if it passes the early return statement, we say role equals role by name. So now we can filter based upon the ID or based upon the name. So now the role will always be something, and if it's not something, then it would have already errored, for example right here, or for example right here. Now the nice thing that we now can do is just check if the person has the rank, and if not, we can add it to them, but if he or she does, we can just remove it from them. And why? Is because we don't need to do any further checks, because if we go back to the alter roles helper or the ranks helper, you can see that we always check if the hierarchy is still valid. If it's not, it's getting removed. Just to remind you, this function, we always call it when we, for example, fetch all the ranks or the alter roles. So we automatically already filter out all the things that we can't use. So the only thing that's left to do is make sure that the bot is also able to manage roles. And in order to do that, we just go here, create a new line and say require bot permission and then guild permission dot manage roles. So now we are 100% sure that the command is executable. There will be no errors whatsoever. Now the only thing we need to check is whether or not the role that we now have is actually part of the ranks. And in order to do this, the only thing we need to do is if and then ranks.any x, so a lambda expression, and an x.id doesn't equal the role.id. So if none of the ranks equal the role ID that we just received, then we say await reply async, and we say that rank does not exist. So now in that case, the role is not part of a rank, and so we do nothing with it. We again use the early return statement. Now we need to check if the user has the role or if he or she does not have the role. So what we do here is we say if the context.user as socket guild user, and then again use two brackets around it just like this, and then say dot roles dot any and then x, so we use the lambda expression, x dot id equals the role dot id. So if any of the roles that the person has equals the ID that was just passed, it means that the user already has the rank. And in that case, we're going to remove it from them. So again, use a bracket so it nicely fits, use curly brackets. And so what we do here is we say await, then the context.user as socket guild user, and between brackets, and we say dot remove role async, and we pass in the role that we have all the way up there. So now if it's a rank, if the rank was found, we can remove it from them when they have it. And then we say await reply async, successfully removed the rank, and now we can pass in the name of the role. So we go a bit more back here, add a $, and we can say successfully remove the rank role.mention from you, and then a semicolon at the end, and then finally we say return. Now the final thing that we can do is we can add the role to them. So copy these two lines, go all the way here, and we say await context.user socket guild user dot add the role async, and then the role, and then here we say successfully added the rank role.mention to you. Now let's check this out. Let's save all of our code and let's run the bot. Let's go to Discord. So as you know, we earlier set the rank role as one of our ranks. So if we now use rank, it won't work because we did not pass enough arguments. But if we use exclamation mark rank and then rank, then it will say successfully added the rank to you, but I made a typo. But if you look at the account, we now also have the rank role. It works perfectly fine. Now let's say we execute the command again. So we say rank, successfully remove the rank from you, and we no longer have the rank. So that works perfectly fine. Now if we look at the ranks here, it's just listed perfectly fine. For example, if we use the ID, we say rank and then the ID of the rank, it will also work and it will give us the rank again. And if we use it again with the ID, but now remove it, it works perfectly fine. Let's go back to our Discord bot, fix the typo I made earlier, and that means that everything works in the ranks command. The only thing that's left for us to do now is to implement the alter rules. So let's go to the command handler, and we want to create a new function for when someone joins the server. From this episode forward, I'm getting rid of the onReactionAdded event. We no longer really use it. So we're getting rid of it. We're also getting rid of the onJoined task, and we're getting rid on the onChannelCreated event. So we're just getting rid of all of those because we're not really going to use them anymore. They were just an example for episode 5, but for now it's fine. Now the next thing we want to do is create a new event which is called when a user joins. So we say underscore client dot user joined plus equals on user joined, just like this. And it will give us a light bulb when we say generate method command enter dot on user joined. Now, as you know, we need to use the auto roles helper in order to fetch, for example, all the auto roles. So we go here and we say private read only auto roles helper and then the underscore auto roles helper, just like that. Then we go all the way at the end here and we say auto roles helper, copy the name, go here, say underscore auto roles helper equals the auto roles helper, just like that. Now we can go into here, and the first thing we would like to fetch are all of the roles that we can add to the user. So we say var roles equals await underscore auto roles helper dot get auto roles async, and we pass in the arc.guild. Now we also want to make this task async, so we say private async task on user joined, just like that. Now again, we want to check if there are even any roles that we can add to the user. So what we can do here is say if the roles.count is lower than 1, then we just say return. So we use an early return statement if there are no roles to be added. But if there are, in that case, what we want to do is we want to say await arg.add roles async and then all of the auto roles that have been set by the server. And that's basically it. Now it works automatically, and when we now try to join our server, it will automatically give all the auto roles of the server to the user. So let's run our Discord bot. Let's go to Discord, and before actually adding a user to my server, I will first execute the auto roles command. So as you can see, we now have one auto role right here, but we also want to add, let's just add one more so we can see if everything really works. So let's add the verified role to the auto roles. Here we can say add auto role and then verified, just like that. So now if we execute the auto roles command again, you see that we have both auto role and verified roles to be our auto roles. Now I just added my own AKA account, as we call it, to the server, and if we now go to the account, you can see that it has both the verified and the auto role roles. Now if you go to the server, go to server settings and an audit log, you also see that the tutorial bot has updated the roles for my alt account, and we now have the role auto role and verified. So everything works perfectly fine. Now if I open up my browser and go to the alt account, so now I am on my different account. This account doesn't have any permissions, as you can see, another administrator. So now if I try to execute the ranks command, it will show me all the ranks. And if I try to join them, so if I say !rank, it will work. It will give me the rank, role, and everything works perfectly fine. If I execute the command again, it will remove the rank from me and I no longer have the rank. Now, for example, if I try to execute the command auto roles, just like this, then it will fail. It will tell me, hey, you don't have the required permissions, and that's exactly how we want it to be. So everything works, and we have created amazing systems for both auto roles and ranks. So that was it for this episode. It was a lot of stuff at once. We did a lot of coding, we did a lot of database operations, but we did also make amazing stuff. In the next episode, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we will work on customizing our welcoming service. So how we can send an image to the welcoming channel, how we can set the welcoming channel, how we can change the background of our image generator, so we can all set those values in a database. Now, if you have any issues whatsoever, please comment them in this video or go to the description down below, take a look at the link to our Discord support server, and we will be happy to help you. Also, as a quick reminder, the entire code that we write will always be on the GitHub repository online, which you can also find in the description down below. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a like, and please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more episodes or even more series. Have an amazing day, and I hope to see you in the next one.